I just want to just flag another thing, which is what's been going on this week with Labour. Because as I've said, generally speaking, bad people in Britain get away with most things, very few consequences. Another exception was, and this is just appalling, Neil Coyle, who has been suspended after allegations of racist comments made by a journalist. We're talking about xenophobia, by the way, which is a form of racism which has proliferated in the COVID era, and there's not been enough to talk about it. And I don't want to just make this all about Neil Coyle at this outset, this point about racism, because, xenophobia, we've seen attacks on people of Chinese origin, Chinese appearance, people, not, unfortunately, racist are obviously indiscriminate with who they target. So they will go after people who often, obviously, aren't even of Chinese origin. But the huge numbers of racist attacks, racist abuse being suffered by people of Chinese or Asian heritage in Britain and in the West and beyond. And Neil Coyle was accused of racially being racist, making racist comments towards a brilliant, very well-respected young journalist in Westminster. Now, a lot of people then said, some journalists said, because Neil Coyle had been banned as well. He'd been suspended already from parliamentary bars after swearing repeatedly at a Labour staffer. And then allegedly, when a Conservative MP intervened to calm him down, Neil Coyle yelled at him, fuck off and lose some weight. Lovely, lovely stuff. Now, Neil Coyle is, when people said, oh, well, why wasn't action taken? Because people know, Left Out, which was another book about the Corbyn era, went into the abuse, the constant messages that Neil Coyle sent to Jeremy Corbyn. It's not the only politician that I'm aware of that Neil Coyle has spammed with completely ridiculous and sometimes, just out of order messages. But they were like, well, why wasn't action taken? Everyone's known about it. Well, why wasn't it reported then? Why have all these journalists suddenly gone, well, we all knew about Neil Coyle. Well, why didn't you say anything then? And I think the point about Neil Coyle is, this is, I'm afraid, a point I'm going to make, is that faction of the Labour Party, the kind of right of the Labour Party, are some of the most unpleasant people I've met in my entire life. I've been around politics in a formal sense for 17 years. I'm a geriatric millennial. I started working in Parliament in 2005. I met some very unpleasant people who, it was humiliating to have to share the same oxygen with them. But some of the most personally unpleasant people I've always met are on the Labour right. People who are so venomous and nasty. And you just wonder, why did you get into politics? What makes your heart beat a bit faster? Is it ending poverty and injustice? It doesn't seem that with a lot of them. It seems actually just hating the left has become their all-defining personality. And the reason you see we haven't had Neil Coyle's terrible behaviour being properly reported on before is because the rules of British politics are, if you're abusive to the left, then fine. There are no consequences. Now, in this particular case, he made the mistake of being racist towards a young, very well-respected journalist in Westminster. But the sort of behaviour on display, which I've seen, which I've been on the receiving end, just general abuse from right-wing Labour MPs in person and via text message or whatever, just horrible behaviour. Horrible behaviour. It is embarrassing to support the same political party as these people or be in the same political party, which I know a lot of people think I'm completely delusional to continue supporting on those grounds. What can I say? I'm a sucker. Another point, which just while we're on this subject of the Labour Party, it's been reported in the Sunday Times that, I'll just read it out. This is about Jeremy Corbyn. There's no mechanism available to deselect him other than the trigger mechanism under which his local party would have to vote for a new contest, which he would then have to lose. As a popular local MP, this will not pose a threat to him. However, a senior party insider said, we are determined to bring this to a head. The current position is not sustainable. A source close to Sir Keir Starmer said there was no chance he would bring back Corbyn and that his time in the Labour Party was effectively over. Even if Corbyn apologises for his comments, as was demanded by Nick Brown, the former chief whip, it is understood that the party would find a pretext for continuing his suspension. At least they're honest. When he was suspended at the time, some of Keir Starmer's advisors briefed the media that this was their clause 4 moment. That does not sound like they were actually driven then, were they, suspending him by being affronted by the comments he made. but they were actually saying, well, actually, here's an opportunity to, kind of have a kind of, we've completely purged ourselves of Corbynism. This is a new political party. Keir Starmer served, obviously, in the shadow cabinet. He was appointed by Jeremy Corbyn. He supposedly campaigned to make him prime minister. In the leadership contest, positioned himself as Corbynism with competence and unity, essentially, professionalised. But he called the 2017 manifesto his foundational document. When he was asked on national television whether he'd nationalise gas, energy, he stuck and utilities. He stuck his hand up, and he committed to a whole series of policy pledges from defending migrants' rights, etc., which he has abandoned. It is the biggest, as Matt Zarb Cousin, who is the former spokesperson for Jeremy Corbyn, but the biggest political heist in history. I know people go, why don't you focus your fire on the Tories? Have a look at my last YouTube videos. They're all on the Tories. We can talk about Labour as well. I mean, it is astonishing the level of dishonesty that this person stood for party leader on a completely false prospectus. And the reason he's got away with it goes back to the Neil Coyle point, is the rules of British politics are you can be as dishonest or abusive or whatever as you want, as long as there's the left on the receiving end. So a lot of journalists know that Keir Starmer stood on a completely dishonest platform. He's reneged on what he said he would be, but they like that because their view is, well, they have a huge burning antipathy towards the left. So their view is the left fair game, do what you want to them. And I just think, in terms of where we go from here, the people around Keir Starmer, I'm sorry to say, some of them who I know, and I've known a lot of some of Keir Starmer's close allies I've known most of my adult life, they don't have a vision for the country other than often a kind of burning hatred towards the left. So they keep doing these things now. The reason that they're doing this now, and Keir Starmer did this tub thumping, neocon article essentially on foreign policy. I mean, because he's positioning himself, people don't like it when I said this, to the right of Joe Biden, including on foreign policy, which given what Joe Biden's doing at the moment is not great. Just a hawkish, tub thumping, rah, 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 NATO kind of article. They're doing all this now because the Tories have set themselves on fire, so they have political space as they see it to go after the left and define themselves against the left. That's why they're picking this fight about Corbyn. That's why they're doing this foreign policy stuff. What they're trying to do is use this to go, well, we've got an opinion poll lead, which has nothing to do with anything they've done. It's because the Tories have set themselves on fire. But now we're going to use this as an opportunity to kind of legitimize and cement the marginalization and humiliation of the left within the Labour Party and within British politics. That's transparently what they're doing at the moment. Now, in terms of the polling, I mean, a new poll's just come out which shows Labour with a 3-point lead. That was based on them changing the methodology. Survation, was it a Survation opinion? I'll check. I think it was opinion, actually. They changed the methodology. So you might think, well, fair enough. I mean, that Labour's still ahead and they've changed the methodology. Actually, the old methodology gives Labour a much bigger lead. But the reason the new methodology is important is it takes into account that the shift in the Tory position, the decline in Tory polling has overwhelmingly been driven by Tory voters going to don't know. So the new polling methodology takes that into account and actually therefore hands Labour only a 3-point lead. Now, another poll which has come out, here we go. This is who would make the best prime minister. Keir Starmer, 26%, down 5 points. Boris Johnson, 24 points, -1. 49% said don't know. That's gone, or none of these. That's gone up by 5 points. I would say, by the way, who'd make the best prime minister? I'd say Keir Starmer. So, I mean, even that 26% includes people like myself, who I'm afraid to say has utter contempt for Keir Starmer, but would still prefer Keir Starmer in an open contest to Boris Johnson, because obviously, I'm not like the anti-Corbyn people who delighted in watching the Labour Party defeated when their guy wasn't in charge. I would still take a Labour government over a Conservative government. Of course I would. To be tied, essentially, with Boris Johnson. At the moment, Keir Starmer's tied with Boris Johnson about who'd make the best Prime Minister. What does he have to do? What does Boris Johnson have to do? I mean, he's literally being investigated by the police. He's repeatedly broken the law. He's lied to the British public. There's a massive cost of living crisis. So I do look at Labour's position, particularly given Boris Johnson's going to get thrown overboard at some point and replaced with someone else, and think they should be pretty worried because they're not offering a compelling vision for the country other than let's go and attack the left.